zoning commission, special meeting called for tonight. The zoning commission, had a appointed or elected chair, who couldn't be here tonight, Alan Stratmeyer, and you've never elected a vice chair. But when this process got started, I think Mr. Wills was the chairman, it has been for years, chairman of the planning commission. So for tonight, it'd be my recommendation that you select someone to chair the meeting tonight in the absence of the actual chair of the zoning commission. So I think that might be the first order of business.
I'd be glad to let somebody else do it.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that, Chair.
That way you won't have to move.
Yeah.
So, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we've got approval of take-up of the meeting, minutes from the last meeting, which are included in your packet. So, if you haven't, take a second and look over those, see if you have any questions or comments. That was it. On November the 1st, set up hearing dates, discussed some of the questions about the zoning map, but we did not take any formal action at that point other than setting the dates, did we? Any questions on those maps? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now we have a spot here for public comment. So anybody who wants to now can go ahead and make comments.
Roll.
What?
Roll call.
Roll call.
On the minutes?
We can do a roll for the evening. Alan Stratmeyer, Clyde Wills,
There, yes.
John Taylor, Jim Young, Mike Souders, Don Harper, Don Gregory, Mary Ruth Brandon, Louis Bowles,
Here.
Bob Lingley, Bruce Cummins,
Here.
Mark Thompson,
Yes.
Val Wade.
Okay, so there's a spot here for public comments, but I have an idea that's really gonna work in better, at a little later point after we have done, further action. But anybody who wants to comment now may go ahead.
Are there maps available? Because the notice I got had nothing, no new proposed maps that was presented to the public.
We will be discussing some maps shortly. We just have big copies of them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may request that those making public comment introduce themselves so we can
I'm sorry.
know who it is.
Yeah, my name is Ben Stratmeyer, and it's really hard to make any type of public comment on proposed zoning when maps are not available to the public.
Okay. Well, we haven't seen the maps either, other than just a minute ago looking at them, but we'll all get to see them here in a few minutes together.
So we're having a public hearing to discuss maps that nobody has seen, and a vote is to be taken tomorrow morning, is that my understanding? By the city council? Or the planning commission?
Well, you'll just have to wait and see what's gonna happen as far as looking at maps and any votes that may take place. Just hang loose a few minutes and we'll let you comment about problems or what we're doing wrong later. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to make a note for the record, Ben Stratmeyer. I'm opposed to this public hearing because the election of a chairman to handle this meeting was not on the public agenda. And I feel that without the chair who called the meeting without being here, and the election of the chair, that this public hearing is really out of order and inappropriate.
So no. We're gonna ask Chad to review the meetings that we had having to do with the subject of rezoning and the possible EJT, is that right?
ETJ.
ETJ.
Well, as we know, on December 20th, Thursday, December 20th, and Friday, December 21st, we held our 2 public hearings at the community center for public comment on the document before you, the zoning ordinance for City of Metropolis. We also at that time presented a map making reference to a extraterritorial jurisdiction of 1.5 miles outside of the city limits. This is what was there that night. The 1.5 miles, we all know, is, by Illinois compiled statute allows the municipal zoning authority to extend its zoning authority out into the this ETJ area outside the corporate city limits. With that, we produced a zoning map of zoning districts that we presented that night. And of course, this kind of zooms into the area of the green, of course, being that ETJ, which covers the parcel. We sent notices out, of course, to all parcel owners, notifying them of the public hearing. So, with that being said, we had comments that night. And I'll go over some of the more primary ones. Basically, there was opposition to the ETJ, the 1.5 mile ETJ. Just too far out. There was questions as to why and what's the purpose, but basically there was oppositions to it. Like I said, we decided to go 1.5 miles to see what the feelings would be. The general comments that night made to the commission was negative. We created some variations of the ETJ. The first attempts we made was based on equal distance, but of lesser. We went, the black line being the city limits, where we went 1/8 of a mile, red, 1/4 of a mile, blue, 1/2 a mile, 1 mile, then of course all the way up to 1.5 miles. And this being equal distance around the known city boundaries of the city of Metropolis. And really, I guess, this was kind of a, this is kind of on the table. If anybody likes, exactly, sees anything that they like as far as, going out 1.5 miles, probably not, was met with opposition. 1/2 a mile, maybe not so much. 1/8 of a mile, maybe not so much. So, but then you also got to get to the point on this equal distance. At what point in time do you become effective or not effective with your zoning ordinance that you're trying to pass? With that being said, just kind of going forward with.
Would you,
Yeah.
hand that map back there so
Oh,
they can
sure.
take a look at it?
I don't have a way to hold this up. Ben, you need to.
Just pass it around or whatever.
Yeah, we can pass around a little
Sure.
bit.
And you've seen the other one, I think. So with that being said, we decided to take a look at some other options also. One of those being where the city currently services electric, water, things of that nature. And with that being said, we came up with, once again, the red being city limits, and the blue being pretty much the extent of where our city services go. Now, we got water that runs into the county, but primarily we've got a lot of electric that runs into the county. A lot of it runs Mount Mission Road, Airport Road, out North Avenue, things like that, Cedar Lane. We do have an electrical distribution line that goes across just south of Gurley Road. That ties in the industrial park with high school and things like that. We get Mary's Lane, we already provide services to Mary's Lane, Bullock Lane, and Fawn Lane. But it doesn't go anywhere out that 1.5 miles on the other side of the interstate. It definitely doesn't go 1.5 miles north of where the high school is. So it pretty much stops right where we, service, residents, businesses of, City of Metropolis and Massac County. With some sort of sense that we could have a discussion tonight that if you're serviced by the City of Metropolis, then, there's going to be some sort of zoning guideline or developmental guideline applied to your, development, your land, and things of that nature. And this appears to be, kind of a decent way of looking at things. I mean, at least it's got, it's not just like to say, well, why did you do an eighth one? Well, just, maybe not a great reason if you can come up, unless you can come up with one, but at least extending out to where our services are. And then once again, if somebody bought some land and the city was gonna provide services, this map probably adjusts, it probably adapts, and it probably changes. If somebody came to town and wanted to buy land, wanted to be on city services, city electric, city water, probably city electric first, well then, maybe somebody builds here, well then maybe this line comes up a little bit. But it does not create or take into some sort of buffer amount of unknown area of just, we're gonna go a half a mile. And we'll get what we get, and we'll, deal with split parcels or partial parcels or full parcels. But this kind of says, if you're there and you're hooked up to us, or if you're going to be served by us, and you're going to build something or develop something, this was kind of the way of saying, here's what, we want some say-so. And from that, we created our new zoning map, or kind of the proposed map. And you kind of look at the two side by side. It takes out, a lot of territory. That green, that ETJ green gets whittled down quite a bit. And pretty much covers a lot of residential areas that we already serve. So I guess kind of one of the things that we want to probably start talking about tonight is ETJ district. Do we have any discussion or want to have a talk about where we feel like we want to go, or what we want to do, or how we want to approach that? Most everything that follows that, that was discussed that night at the hearings, I mean, really depends on whether there is going to be an extraterritorial jurisdiction or zoning in the ETJ or some version of the ETJ. Because once we, if we say yes, we get into other topics that were discussed that night, which is probably the next most important one that night, was probably ETJ representation. If I'm in the ETJ, can I be a part of the zoning board of appeals? Can I be a part, why am I, how can I be involved in this? The city's gonna be making decisions, how can I be a part of this? Well, one of the answers to that really is anybody, whether in the city or ETJ, has the right to, amend and make changes to this document. Just because you live in ETJ doesn't mean you can't show up and say, I'd like to see something changed in this. I mean, this document isn't against anybody, it supports everybody. So they can actually show up and make changes or make recommendations. Of course, I think we've got a 6-month window where we can. But after that 6 months, if somebody wants to come in or get something rezoned, or they want to make an amendment to the document, they have the ability to do that. And then finally, like I said, we move on to other areas that were brought up that night. Fees, item number 3, probably on the list, was like fees and charges, things of that nature. People feel like they're being taxed. A lot of the fees that are in the zoning ordinance book, yeah, people probably in the county don't pay for building permits right now. The assessor charges, we charge 3 cents a square foot, so it's not like a lot. There are other fees in there for like zoning letters and notification. Most people that live in a residential house don't ever get a zoning letter of notification or need one. But somebody maybe want to do like a title research or something like that, or want to get their company wants to come in and buy something, maybe they need something that verifies or an official document that says what this is zoned as. So they're the people that are going to pay the fees. So, but fees was another discussion. Other things that were brought up that night was annexation versus zoning, eminent domain, covenants versus zoning. And like I said, most of those were pretty self-explanatory. Covenants are more restricted. Most covenants are more restricted than our zoning. So people would have to abide by them in the subdivision. We don't have to worry about so much our zoning code. Like I said, let's see, we had concerns about whether the map was drawn correctly. We did take a look at some properties, and we did find out that there was some variations to some areas out by the interstate, where a property was thought to be in, actually was not. So the 1.5 miles, 50 years ago, that would actually come in just a little bit. We found some information when the park was annexed in Fort Massac. There was a very subtle variation of that on the very far east side, which would eliminate, I think, some people on, is it Belgrade Road, I believe? I think so. It would actually bring that over a little bit. So we did find some variations. Once again, we were producing the map and working with data that was there. At that time, we did the best we could, but we did do some looking into that. questions that evening with just general advantages. Why, you know, what's the advantage of it? These are people that say that they have lived at their home and on Airport Road for 20, 30 years. What's the advantage of zoning? Well, probably won't be an advantage. I mean, you just kind of, you know, you're residential by right, you've been living there, it's permitted by right in the A district, probably won't see a lot of changes. There was questions about who do I call for 911 services. Now, that really doesn't change. I mean, when you dial 911, it's routed to the emergency system, county or city services respond. It's not, you're not annexed into the city. It still works that way. But really, you know, like I said, it's the ETJ where we probably need to start off our conversation. Where do we want to go with that? Do we want to have it? Do we want to make it an equal distance? Do we want to make it based on some sort of utility services? I think that's kind of where we move at.
Well, let me ask this, of the people that are out there in the audience. Are any of you that want to discuss anything other than the ETJ as far as the rest of the, I mean, the biggest part of the zoning ordinance apparently is no interest.
I'd say what we want to know is where the boundary's going to actually be.
All right, so, let me ask a couple of questions of the attorney that Chad just mentioned. Did you find out, what the state law is on representation of anybody outside the city on a zoning board?
My zoning board, Board of Appeals.
That's just gonna get those two. In case I need to point something.
I got a question.
Sure.
The only thing I've found relative to the zoning board of appeals, in a municipality less than 500,000, is supposed to be 7 members. And they're appointed by the mayor with the
That's based on
advice and consent of the city council. That's all it says.
We've got power line south. Runs through
It
the
doesn't.
south.
I'm trying to see if there's anything that speaks to
Is it?
residency.
Okay. So this is complete rural.
You're only actually kind of curves up.
Okay.
That actually does that.
Yeah.
So we've got power line runs through the woods next to us, so we were saying that
Okay.
anybody down here.
Okay.
Elected sections, I
Probably
see.
comes up for us if they build something.
Okay.
With that being
I think
said,
people is effective
really isn't a lot down.
if you go with what the city supplies, water, electricity, and things. I think people is effective in
Our
that.
regulations, federal regulations.
You know, outside the city limits that we are.
Well,
in.
Override the flood.
I think he has that.
Hey, Chad.
I think Chad can answer that, Louis.
What?
I think Chad can
Well, what I'm
answer
saying
that.
is, that's either a wetland
Because I think
or
he
flood.
plotted how many parcels.
Well, we have, yeah,
were
well,
involved in each
we have a
phase.
local
Where-
floodplain.
Wherever
ordinance.
place he drew the lines, he'd say,
That
okay,
talks
now
about
that's this
the
many parcels.
as far as base flood elevation and things like that. Yeah.
Chad, we've got a question.
Please, right now. With the ETJ, were the city utilities provided outside of the municipality boundaries? Do you have an estimated population?
That's what Louis asked you to.
Yeah, that's, I was repeating it,
Estimated
bringing it,
population
of non-city residents that would be affected by that.
No, I do not. We probably come up with that though, but yeah, no, I do not. I
You know,
do not have a.
and
Just a second. Mayor, when the city sends out electric bill, is there anything there that easily determines whether they're inside the city or not, other than looking at the address?
They may have something on their software that it probably is because if, the way it is now, if you live outside the city limits and you're on city water and city sewer, there is a separate fee. Water bill is greater for someone that's not a city resident than someone that's a resident, and they may have a way to track that and actually get a figure off that.
There may be a way to do it through the zip code too. Yeah. I have to, look. We tried to do it by, there's an additional, and I don't ask me, the post office assigns, 6296 is Metropolis, but there's an additional numerical digits for inside and outside. And I know we're getting that software.
Yeah,
At one
if
time.
we haven't got it already, we're getting it.
I can do an easy select of how many properties there are within that boundary. It takes 20 minutes.
I was gonna say, at one point, we had it for some of the
started counting how many there are within the incremental boundaries, the quarter and a half mile, we never did it for the utility.
Or didn't do it for the utility boundary, okay.
It won't be that,
How many was it for the quarter mile? Because that's gonna be,
That's
that's
a
gonna be
lot.
more than the number we're looking at.
Yeah, not that many.
it won't be that many for
I mean,
utilities.
100, 200?
I couldn't tell you, right?
Okay.
Okay, Josh, did you have a specific question on?
Josh Rager, represent the Farm Bureau. Back to the ETJ and the representation that you were discussing. I don't have a state statute, but the Farm Bureau stance is they do support municipalities having at least one voting representative or possibly additional representatives from the ETJ based on the population of the municipality versus that ETJ area of the members affected. And it is allowable. Yeah, I could probably get that in the morning from the Farm Bureau in Bloomington as to what that statute that you were asking about, that would allow for representation from that area specific to this.
Okay, of course, Rick says that the statute apparently does not say one way or the other, but.
Yes.
Meaning it doesn't prohibit it.
It doesn't prohibit
It
it,
doesn't
exactly.
Okay, do our consultants have anything to add at this point from previous meetings or anything that's happened since then?
I believe that we have responded to a number of the concerns about what would a cordon line look like if it's not the mile and a half to include the ETJ. The questions that have come up this evening with respect to number of parcels within those cordon lines, and also I believe within the municipal boundary line are likely Chad's computer, because I know they've been worked on. We can find the population out rather quickly if that's the will of the commission. I think in retrospect, Chad has hit on all of the major items that we had identified. I know there was also some discussion concerning the zoning itself within the extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is the other issue that I would just bring to the fore. And we've been talking about that. We're cognizant of that issue. But in terms of resolution, again, it's the discretion and direction of the commission.
Along that line, I know when we first talked about this at the last hearing, I think we talked about everything in the ETJ just being zoned as agriculture.
Yes, sir.
But then later also talked about, well, some of it being used as industrial or commercial, or that would be what's expected, such as out by the interstate.
Yes.
So that there could be commercial zones in the ETJ as well as agricultural zones.
Yes, and I think that toward the end of the sessions, there was an understanding that there are existing uses in the ETJ and that zoning likely should reflect those uses.
Okay, so apparently, what we need to talk about here tonight is based on people attending and our response at the last hearings is the ETJ. As Chad noted, legally we can go out a mile and a half, but with a lot of people against that. Do we want to discuss eighth mile, quarter mile, or where the city serves electricity, or some combination such as an eighth of a mile plus any further out that the city serves is certain. And so maybe at this point, we ought to ask if there are any comments from the audience about the ETJ. Size of it or regulation.
I'll speak for a lot of my neighbors, we oppose even an eighth of a mile. Say we don't have no need for it. And
You need to
not what y'all
give your
gonna do
name and
now.
address, please.
David Bushclaw, 2437, Illinois 145.
And would you be within the eighth of a mile?
Yes.
Are you served by city services in any way?
No, and I don't need them, I don't want them.
Anyone else?
Mike, what is that? Are we right on the interstate on the line on the east side? What it goes, switch clause is way on down there, and 600 foot is all we're talking about. We have a mile. That looks like
I think David's talking about his farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm still, his farm doesn't come up to, oh, well,
His
I
fa-
mean,
his-
it's not his
It does.
farm, is up there.
No, it is his farm.
It's his farm.
It is his farm.
Correct. Right now, it would extend to the easterly right-of-way of I-24. I think that's where the typical city boundary has been always been determined at. And then, of course, down by the rest area, rest stop, and then on down as when we annexed in Fort Massac State Park, running all the way down the river.
Let's see the map that has the 8th border and so forth on it.
Mile and a half, mile. Half, quarter, and eighth. Variations, once again, would be this area right here, this would come in. That would be a variation, we'd have to update that and change that.
So, Mr. Bush Falls, up here by Belgrade Road, is your farm east or west of Belgrade?
It's north of 45.
He's just off 145 up there.
And it would be
No, to the left. He's right along the interstate.
He's between the interstate and
Surrounding.
145.
That red line is his farm.
surrounding Mr. Stratmeyer's property.
Huh?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
correct.
They're at the interchange, yes.
I don't wanna build something out there, I don't wanna have to go no, city regulations, you know,
So, what questions do you all have or discussion?
I'd like to ask a question. What is the reason, and I don't mean to be, but I just don't understand, why would you want to take in any property that the city does not serve?
Good question.
No, I mean, why would we as the city or the city fathers, the council or anybody, if we don't furnish electricity, we don't furnish water, we don't furnish sewers, why would you want to incorporate them into the zoning?
I was gonna say, if we're gonna use logic, the logical answer, if we're gonna have it, is to use the one with the utility. That would be logically speaking, if we decide that that's the route we're gonna go.
What is the advantage of taking in an eighth of a mile or
The advantage-
100 feet?
Has to do with planning, that eighth of a mile will probably, within the next few years, have something that would want to be in the city. If they should build, they keep talking about building a Walmart out there.
Yeah.
okay.
Never happened.
May I say something again?
Just a second. So if we had some control for planning for things that were gonna come in, that were probably also going to want city service, it would be better to have those people talking to us up front as part of the people they had to deal with, rather than putting up something and saying, all of a sudden, well, now we want city water and electricity.
You know, I can see that, but I can see that happening in 20, 25 years.
Well,
I mean, you know, and then we don't know what's gonna happen.
Mr. Bushbaum.
Yes. Like I say, it's possible, but like I said, and if somebody did want to, if I did decide to sell it, y'all could zone it in at that time. And I don't see, why you have to do it now. It's just, to me, it's just, y'all want control.
Chad, didn't you say when you were explaining this boundary, if someone like Walmart there wanted to come in, that could change boundary then?
Sure.
If they were wanting
If-
city
if-
services.
Yeah,
Once
let's,
annexed in, yes.
Yes.
or, yeah, anybody doing a subdivision where we can provide power to that subdivision or extend our services, I mean, the map would adapt to that. I mean, if you're gonna be, just depending on their location to the other, Fort Massac Water or Southern Illinois Electric or Amber, whoever it may be. I mean, if somebody wanted to buy something and we were close to it, or we were the closest utility, it could change. Or if there was a big box company that came in and said, we wanna be here, we wanna be hooked up to city services, maybe for a cheaper rate, or I don't know what it could be. But yeah, then the map would adapt and change. There's no buffer, so the buffer doesn't extend further out. It just would adapt and kind of evolve and to bring that piece of property into the ETJ.
And
Yeah,
I'll say something else.
sure.
I don't see no light, why do you have to have it now? You know, if somebody did want, you know, if I wanted to sell it, I'm sure y'all would, you know, Walmart come in there,
Sure.
I'm sure y'all would go ahead and zone it at that time. Why do you wanna do it now? Can you,
To me, if we're
anybody
going
ask
to
me
do
that?
anything, this is a logical way of
Where
doing
we
it.
service.
Because we already have
Yeah, we already
a
have it.
plan in place. And just be a matter, we wouldn't, you know, we won't have to go through all
Sure.
this. Now, again, that's logical in situations like that, when we're talking about things, people don't always think logical.
He talks logical, but,
Well,
You got the
he's
plan.
referring to where we service the area. Where-
okay, well, there's no service there.
So
there-
you wouldn't.
Right, you wouldn't be involved,
You
you
wouldn't be
wouldn't be a
involved.
part of it.
They would leave you out of it
Yeah.
altogether.
Okay, they wouldn't zone anybody in then.
If you don't have city water, sewer, any sort of city
I would not be-
utility,
oh, that-
you're not in it.
Right.
You
I would
won't be
not-
involved.
But I would be zoned, would I?
No,
Nope,
I wouldn't not be zoned.
you wouldn't be,
Unless the county.
you wouldn't be,
That line goes through the middle of my farm.
well, that
wouldn't be
was.
zoned.
no, on the original,
Yeah.
on the variations in the original map, sure. But on the
that
utilities,
one.
proposed utilities,
It was
But,
right down your property line.
but legally, that line would still be there zoned.
No,
That red line would not, would
no,
not
the
be-
red line would go away.
Go line, okay.
Okay.
Just here. Okay, that's my,
Chad, you said the map would automatically adjust as needs arise. Would this ordinance be written in such a way that wouldn't have to be changed every time the map changes?
we present and adopt a new zoning map every year, I think, March 31st. So each year, all changes that would make, let's say, you know, there's an annexation, let's say somebody did a subdivision, let's say somebody bought some land and put in a food and feed store, and they hooked up to city services. The map each year would be presented to council, they would just adopt and approve the map. We wouldn't be taking in anybody that wasn't already.
Or didn't wanna be.
Right, right.
Choose to
It would still be our service provided.
What would happen if there was a landowner between Walmart and the city and they didn't wanna be at it?
That's when eminent domain takes it.
Well,
Sad but true.
once again, I mean, you know, we have an interesting area right here. You know, we have, Fawn, Bullock, Mary's Lane, you know, residential areas. So they would be zone A and they would follow development guidelines. But some of this area here is just undeveloped, just wooded area. You know, you could leave it in, leave it out for the time being. The moment somebody builds something there and they tie onto our electric line, you know, then you move it up there, take them in. Just, you know, you can just say, once you hook up, when you hook up, you're gonna
You become subject to.
subject to your zoning use. If you're gonna build a house, yeah, you're just A zone, ag zone. If you're gonna open up a farm, if you're gonna put a commercial place there, zone
One thing we
commercial.
don't wanna do, we don't wanna get in the situation Paducah's been in.
Right.
That's for sure. But that's still not over.
You mean as far as the,
As far as zoning is something wrong.
yeah,
Is that the Duke or is that the
Uh,
county? Is that the county or
It's
the?
down.
It's the county. But it wouldn't make any difference. Cause that's the value of your property.
Right now, that blue line represents utilities that we provide.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty
And
much.
there are some people inside that blue line that are not in the city, but they're paying higher rates, is that right?
They're in the city and they are hooked up to city utilities.
There's not some that is not in the city? I thought I heard somebody say that, well, we're supplying utilities outside the city.
Oh,
trying-
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. They're, yeah.
The
think you
red line
misspoke.
inside?
I misspoke it. Yeah, there are people outside the city, inside this blue line, that
Yeah.
are hooked up to city services.
All right, so if you do what you're talking about, that would bring them in.
Zoning wise,
No,
Right
just
now.
zoning.
Zoning, but not,
Non-annexation, will still not be in the city.
And I assume would not lower their rate.
Not unless they want to annex in the city. They'd still pay a higher rate because they're zoned, but they're not annexed into the city.
Yeah, keep in mind, utility rates have absolutely nothing to do with this
No.
discussion at all, okay? None. I don't wanna get that confused. It's just the boundaries of our utilities, and the biggest issue that we keep encountering when we extend utilities out is that properties that aren't platted, properties that aren't subdivided or developed properly, we wind up having a difficult time setting utilities up and then properly charging the property owners too. Because if you, inside the city, if you're gonna develop a subdivision, then to run the electric, we charge so much per lot to get the electric there. Well, if somebody doesn't create any lots because they don't plat anything, they don't subdivide anything, how do you charge when the guy back here in the very back wants electric brought to him and there's nobody in between and there's no real developer, they just sort of crop up and do this sort of thing.
well, that's
And
when you make a decision that you don't do it.
Well,
I mean,
unfortunately,
you
that
gotta
has
be
no
a
horse
horse
teeth.
degree of some
Yeah,
kind,
I agree.
and don't let one person control 50.
I agree. But if they're gonna seek our utilities, then they need to play with these.
So that's kind of hand in hand, and I mean, we've had some, suburbs or whatever, or communities that built up out here and built streets that didn't meet specs, and
Right.
we ended up with a,
That's when you gotta stop it.
yeah, so, yeah.
And that's part of what the idea here is.
Or we have subdivisions that aren't contiguous to the city of Metropolis, that end up on city power. They plat, subdivide, record at the courthouse. They are expected to, but not always known to, provide city electrical departments, water departments with a copy of the plat to help prepare and design the extension of city services. Sometimes these subdivisions don't, they're not fully 100% developed, maybe just a portion of one. And then a few years later, somebody buys lot 15 in the very back, and the electric guy's gotta go out and set 5 or 6 poles. That person finds out that there's a charge for that. And they're like, well, why didn't anybody tell us? Well, there's not a lot of, anything that we can do up front that says you have to come to us, or we have some sort of, a necessity here for us to sign off on this. This kinda helps us with a situation like that. It says, if you wanna do a subdivision, not just contiguous to the city, but within this ETJ or something like that, you're gonna subdivide, plat, do something like that, we gotta sign off on it too. That way we guarantee, we make sure, hopefully, roads are right, curbs are in there, utilities are where they need to be in place, everything's paid for and covered up front, so people just buy and sell lots, build houses, and go about their way. So,
Question,
yeah.
does that also protect us from another utility company coming in to sell power or whatever the case may be?
Yes.
No, can't do it. The federal law says that you can buy electricity from anybody you want to.
Except if you're in a municipality that
Yeah.
distributes its own electricity, and in any territory that we distribute
Yeah,
in.
but that's not
no
in the
other-
city limits.
Yeah, but no other if we're in the territory, no other, an IOU under state law cannot come in, nor can a co-op come in. If we've elected to take that territory, and they've not, and in some cases, we bought territory
Yeah.
from Ameren, okay? They can't come back and ask.
Example of that is Woodhaven.
Right, that was what I was.
Bullock and
Bullock and Farm.
Bullock.
We bought those
Yeah.
lines.
The same law applies on water districts too. If we were to buy out water district property or territory, they can't come back later. Now, they're not allowed to sell to us. Let me back that up. We can't take it away from them, okay? We cannot take it away from them or force them to sell to us, as long as they have debt outstanding to the federal government. There's a federal law on that too. But they can't sell to us and sign a waiver. We've done that in a couple instances, but yeah. Now, electric, yeah, as long as it's the territory that we have acquired, okay? Now, there's some rules that also govern where co-ops got priority too, but yeah. But the law on customer choice won't apply to municipalities and their customer base, okay? We fought that battle already.
build a barn or something, I'm gonna have to come to the city, get a permit. And, you guys are here now and say, but 10 years from now, it might be a whole, you really don't know, who's gonna be here. And like I say, once you're zoned in, you're there, you're stuck, you can't get out.
At the present time, if you wanted to build a barn, would you have to go to the county and get a permit?
Yeah, but it'd be probably a lot easier and cheaper than going to you guys.
Okay, so, we've got a couple questions. We've been working on this, in my personal opinion, is that we ought to go at least an eighth of a mile outside to be thinking in terms of what's gonna happen over the next 10 or 20 years and try to, make sure that we have the right kind of subdivisions, businesses and so forth, and no hog operations or chicken operations or anything like that just across the city limits. But we've got to have a little of everybody and get all the questions answered if you have any further questions. I know that there'll be some people upset if we go out any at all, including just where the city serves power. But it's like most things, they want our services and don't want any regulation. But there's certainly a lot can be said for having some regulations where the city serves power. So what are your all's thoughts or questions or? Yes.
Back up to the map.
Which one?
Back up to the map.
Sure.
Todd Sumner, 2755 North Avenue. City power, customer only.
Yeah.
My property is right up in this area, the one with the corner cut off of it. But the parcel that receives power is here on the southeast corner, 4.5 acres. The rest of it is purely farmland with no utilities at all on it. So should it be outside of the map, first question. And second, if my 4.5 acres that I live on and pay taxes on separately, if I decide that this isn't working for me, can I switch power companies, one? And if I do switch, will my property go outside of the line? Will my 4.5 acres go outside of the line?
Say,
First, should my farm be outside of the line?
Okay.
And second, would my 4.5 acres go out if I switched utilities?
So it is separately assessed.
Yes.
let's see, take a look at this right here.
It
Yeah,
shows both parcels on there, Chad.
So is that you right here?
Yes.
Okay.
This
Mhm.
little rectangle with the corner.
Where your house is? Yeah.
The corner is my neighbor. Okay. But this is purely farmland.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like I was saying earlier, I mean, the owner of both properties receives city services. Obviously, there's nothing on this land right here. And that would be a decision, I mean, yeah, he lives just right here on this small parcel, I mean, yeah, you could actually probably move that out and take the farm out of it if you wanted to. If you ever put something on the farm, you wanted city services.
I hate to mention it, but this is mine and it's great.
Right.
This is
And the
also
re-
mine and it's green.
Right,
So-
well, I guess the reason being is, these properties here, I felt abutted more of a possibility of coming off Country Club Road. It was kind of a question of who would service these. They're just far enough off Airport Road, far enough off here, and plenty far over here, so I just kind of, but you're right, you know, it could. And if you did change providers, because we stop right here, and I don't know if that's Ameren or Southern Illinois.
I know the neighbors across the street
Right.
are someone else.
Exactly.
They are.
They-
I have
if you
city
could
power,
change-
and I'm glad to have it, don't get me wrong, but I have city power because when I moved here in '87, I called Bess LaBoots, that's who I knew.
Sure.
I said, I need power, and she said, we got you.
Yeah,
That's how things work in a
literally,
small town.
if that line got swung around another 50 feet to the north and you tie it on to somebody else, you know, why not?
Like, so the question about this being out, yes or no, or?
I don't see why, I think that's a possibility. I think you're correct in that is that this parcel right here should be, you know, because it's in currently, but the farm itself, you know, I think the commission wanna look at it that way. I think that's like I was saying earlier, this area here that's underdeveloped, where there's nothing here just yet, currently it could be shown in, currently it could be shown out.
County water, city power, and my own lagoon, some kind of.
If this was just
Mixed up.
gonna be farm out there and what, didn't have any
You're
utilities.
multi-purpose.
Yes, yes.
You know, well, like I said, you know, with that lake back there, I mean, maybe you wanna do a subdivision of houses back there, you know, no.
That farm's been in the family since
Right.
1873,
Won't be
single family farm.
Gotcha.
And there's only one other person welcome to live there, and he's in the room.
I got it.
But don't tell him I said that.
Get that right.
So Rick, do you see any reason why, this farm
Can we carve it out? Nah, you can carve it out.
I mean, that's basically what like you were saying with those parcels right there, you know, it's just, you know, the concern that this map is not dynamic, you know, that it's, or is dynamic and has the ability to change, sure, I think that's a good, you know, that's exactly what we're talking about, you know.
I do think, one more comment, I do think the utility map makes the most sense.
Sure.
Whoever thought of that.
I tell you what, I don't see how, and y'all put the word involved, I'm just we're on the zoning committee, so we wasn't involved in all that, but I don't see how you can take anybody in that don't receive anything from the city. I think you're just opening up a can of worms. I don't see how it would be feasible to take in an eighth mile, half a mile, or a mile and a half, or what. But take in what we already know that we're servicing. That's just the way I look at it, and I think Bob said that seemed like the logic answer.
Clyde, I've watched that, we've been doing this since 2000.
Sure, yeah.
And 600 foot is not gonna make or break me, but these people, it will. And and as far as like Lewis says, it makes sense right now. Now, later on, you wanna tackle it as a different subject, fine, but to get it done and get this over with and get something done, I'm for leaving it just as where the utilities are, and like Mr. Summers, carve his back out of there. And that leaves what, Danny, what are you looking at out there?
It would be away from me, so it wouldn't be a
Okay.
problem.
So, and then Mr. Stratmeyer, you wouldn't have a problem with us if we stay with just the red line of the services only, right?
Well, I've got a comment on that.
All right,
Okay, I've got comments.
okay. Well, what about David?
Yes, like they just services only.
You know, red lines. So, I mean, everybody really out there, I mean, we can let Mr. Stratmeyer talk with you about that. I'm going with Lewis. Right now, the nine to make everybody happy. And I can tell you something, I've been here now since '74. And I don't see, other than at the interstate, any development on a large scale. The economy, in another 4 more years, and things look like they're, you know, it's gonna be another 10 years before Metropolis ever sees anything. If we don't start getting food places, franchise, if they don't invest, then you're not gonna see anything else invest. And I mean, why are we going out there and causing all the headache for 600 feet? Well, we could stop that now and go ahead and get this thing.
And you can always
set.
get it later,
Yeah, let's fight that fight at another
when you
time.
get it.
At their choice, if they want to come into the city.
Yeah. And
That line can
so
move.
I'm with Lewis on that tonight. Don't get me wrong, I haven't, but
Well, y'all done the work on it, and I appreciate it so much.
Clyde's done all the work. He really has.
Well, let's, let Mr. Stratmeyer make
Finish.
comments, and then we'll see if we're ready to vote.
Thank you, Commission. I want to make it for the record that Todd Sumner is my brother-in-law, and I know where I want to build. Todd is a nice member of our family, so I want to bring a couple of items. While a lot of the landowners here may be more pleased with keeping the zoning to where city services are utilized, and there is some logic there. But I also want to tell you a little bit about my background. I am a CPA. I'm the finance director for the city of Salem, which is a similar sized community as Metropolis. I'm also an auditor, and I serve 6 villages in Washington and Marion counties. And the issue of zoning is an emotional issue because you deal with landowners. And part of the landowner is the freedom of economic thought that goes back to our early days as a republic. When I even take a look at the zoning of the utilities, while it does make logic, I would ask, why would the city not want to annex where they're already serving? And I give credit to Walmart developers. I think they have enough sense to ask for water and sewer and where they're gonna get it before they build a multi-million-dollar development, okay? I think that they're gonna know where they're gonna get their water and sewer from and make arrangements before they ever invest in millions of dollars worth of real estate and before they ever build a building. So I don't think you have to worry about the big box stores going out here on Mr. Bushclaw's farm and building a multi-million-dollar development and saying this, oh my gosh, we don't have water, sewer, or electricity. I don't think that's a realistic problem. As Todd said, his family's owned his land since 1873. That's about 140 years. There's not been no Walmart out there in his place. Mr. Bushclaw's owned his property and his family for over 100 years. There's no Walmart there. Our family's owned what was formerly the weight scale property. We've owned it for 35 years, 1974, I think, maybe more than that. We've been waiting. We own land around the city of Metropolis. We've been waiting. And I will say it very succinctly. A rising tide raises a lot of ships, and there is no family that would prosper and benefit more than our family, that if the city of Metropolis and Massac County prospers. Nobody prospers more. Whatever project it is, whether it's an industrial, retail, or that, our family benefits when the city and the county prospers. But we've been waiting a long time. So I think when you talk about your discussions of big, fast development happening out at the interstate, we've been waiting. We've been watching. And from our discussions it's still a long time away. So going back to the economic freedom is of tying up somebody's real estate, rules, regulations. I don't know why the city would not want to annex. Now I understand that there may be other reasons that I'm unfamiliar with, but generally I don't know why the city would not want to annex property that it's already serving. And some of that property highlighted, like in my brother-in-law's case is, you know, it really shouldn't be zoned, it should be free. Nothing's gonna go out there. I think the maps need to be curtailed back a little bit. I'm not for sure though that zoning is an effective economic development policy as maybe some of you all think it is. If you look at Massac County here, say over the last couple census bureaus, Massac County is up and down, but basically fluctuated to stay the same. The census population of the city of Metropolis has actually gone down, yet annexing hundreds if not thousands of more additional acres. And I think you see, for whatever reason, whether it's broader land, wanting to be a more rural area, or less rules and regulations, people are finding living in the county is a better place to live than living in the city. And I work for a municipality, and these are some of the discussions that we have in our own municipalities. These are some of the discussions we have. What can we do to attract people into the municipalities? And obviously, if there was an easy answer, every municipality would do it. But there's something there that is causing people to leave municipalities to go to rural areas. For some people it might be more space. It might be a wooded area. It might be schools. A lot of those things don't necessarily apply here, but if you look at the trends, people are leaving the municipality and going to the county. If you push that trend out where you're zoned and effectively in the city without a right to vote, you just keep pushing your development or your building or your population moves further and further out. And I don't think that that is good economically for the municipality of the city of Metropolis. And I don't think it's necessarily good for the prosperity for the county government of Massac. And as I said, I prosper when the city and the county prospers. And I want the city and the county to prosper. But I don't believe that this zoning proposal does anything at least the early ones, that really is going to, help prosperity here locally. I've talked to Rick Abel in the past years before you cringe, Rich. I supported the city of Metropolis annexing, Fort Massac, and I support, the city of Metropolis annexing more Fort Massac. I think there's some benefits, to marketing the community, of having such a large park and conservation area in the city of Metropolis. But when you start saying, yes, now we wanna encroach out an eighth, a quarter, a mile and a half from conservation areas in Massac County, I really think that it brings a lot of skepticism from people in the county. So I have a comment, is I'm generally opposed for reasons of economic freedom, and I have no land in that area that's served by the city utilities that I'm aware of, okay? But I'm opposed for that because I think you take away economic freedom. When you take away economic freedom is you take away prosperity, at least from some group of people. Now, I know that some people believe that by having zones and certain rules and regulations, it creates a standard. And there may be a little truth to that. I'm not for sure though, here in this county, what we've seen is that really works. That might work in some other places, and I understand that. I work for a municipality, we have these same discussions. But generally I'm opposed to this, but I can understand why the city would not want to annex places where it already has its utilities. I understand that there may be some cost to that and looking at that, but then I think that creates for planning. Our community in Salem has a planning and zoning commission. And I don't agree with some of the things that they do, but I tell them about it and I open it up in a voice, in a forum, and I discuss that. So I'm generally opposed to zoning outside city limits, first and foremost, because I don't think it really helps the economic development. But if the city sees need for their costs and the managing of their utilities for everybody, then it would make sense to me that you would annex those portions in. But certainly when you go outside, like my brother-in-law's farm and where I'm gonna build, I don't think that needs to be, his property certainly doesn't need to be annexed or zoned in that. It's been there 140 years. Mr. Bushclaws has been in his family over 100 years. And I'm not saying is that these gentlemen would never sell, but it is gonna take a whole lot of money, and it's never gonna go for so-called market price.
Walmart can't buy it.
That's right. So, those are some of my comments. One thing I did find out is that as using the zoning is that, the zoning commission here has not worked with the county, in coordinating or an economic development plan. And I know that the county is generally opposed to zoning, okay? In fact, I talked to a board member just a few minutes ago and he said he was totally unaware of this meeting tonight. A 48-hour notice to affect landowners, dozens of landowners, is really not a good public policy. Our chairman's not here, and you know, there would be a lot more landowners here if it was more open and more discussion, and we're gonna have a vote tonight, and maybe city council's gonna take it on in the morning. It really raises cynicism whether or not something is trying to be pushed upon people in the county. And it's unfortunate because I know many of you are good men, and I think you would be appalled to think of some of the things that I've heard from the cynicism that some of our rural neighbors have said about members on this commission, and which I don't believe, but this type of policies creates unnecessary cynicism, okay? And in my position, I see what municipalities go through. I have an understanding. I think in this particular case, it's not necessary. And lastly, for the record, I'll do it again. I'm not for sure that this meeting still meets the legal requirements of a public hearing since we voted for a new chair of the meeting. So I'll pass that on. Thank you.
Rick, I have a question for you. Are we required to hold public hearings?
far as, the statute only requires one public hearing. Now, you can continue it, you know, for as long as you want, you can adjourn it. Technically, I don't think we actually adjourned after the last 2 days that we had. We went ahead and continued on. Every meeting is essentially open to the public. Really, you'll adjourn it about the time you decide you want to issue your report. Now, what happens is the council won't vote probably anytime real soon, but I mean, what happens is when we get to the stage of adjourning this, okay, you will make a report and send the draft ordinance and the draft map to the city council. That's all that you will do. Once the city council then by statute will take that up, and they can either approve it, or they can modify it themselves, or they can send it back to you for more work, okay? And say, hey, you guys need to work on this, and we're not satisfied with this, all right? That will be on, you know, if it's taken up by the city council, that'll be on an agenda, just like you have an agenda, which by the way went out last Friday, okay? So that will be your job, once the city council, your job is finished once the city council adopts something relative to this. But your job as a practical matter may be finished once you send them your report and your the recommended ordinance in the form you want it in. Because if they go ahead and adopt it, you're certainly done, all right? If they don't send it back to you, you're basically done, all right?
It'd be surprising.
Pardon?
It would be surprising. Especially,
Then you go back to just being the plain old planning commission or the plain old zoning board of appeals.
I don't think they'll accept it as we'll present it. I would be surprised if they just rubber stamped it.
But since it's taken us 7 or 8 years to get this far, you're not gonna see the city council holding a special meeting and approving it tomorrow.
Well, I think Mr. Lingel's original question is I think under the Open Meetings Act is there's 48 hours notice, and part of that notice is the agenda. That you gotta give 48 hours to your agenda, and the action tonight changed the agenda, and I just question whether that is legal. And there's a special city council meeting set for tomorrow, either at 11 or at 1, is it?
No.
Commission meeting.
Oh,
So
commission.
commission again.
It's a continuation.
Oh.
Tomorrow.
Same thing.
Okay.
And by the way, yes, you're allowed to elect a chair regardless of whether it's on the agenda or not, because not everybody would know whether the chair is gonna be here or not in advance. Or if the chair gets up and gets sick and leaves, you don't have to, under the Open Meetings Act, you don't.
I don't have a problem with that. My question was, are we required to have another? Then I remembered, we're actually still under the old public meeting.
You are,
We're not.
yeah, you never adjourned it.
Not here, not me.
Yeah, you are. And what we did was, not knowing how long this might take, not knowing how many people might make this or tomorrow, we opted to set 2 days in a row aside so that you guys could potentially work on this and come to some, maybe come to some conclusions or whatever over a couple day period. So that's why there's basically two notices, 2 agendas, whatever, that went out last week. But that's it is just the zoning commission. The council meets the 26th, but it won't be on the agenda then. There might be a report, if you guys wind up finishing today and tomorrow, there may be a report that just maybe verbally reported to them that the zoning commission appears to have finished, and they're gonna have the recommendations to you shortly for your consideration. That's what I think,
But at some point, there's gonna have to be a completed map,
Yep.
and then possibly a public hearing or something where that map is available for anybody to see before the city would vote.
One more question.
Okay?
Will we have more than a 48-hour notice for that?
On a public hearing, it would have to be,
Well, first of all, keep in mind, there's no public hearing required. If y'all decide you want to have a public hearing, sure. You've already met the requirements of the statute as far as public hearings go, okay? If you're gonna have another one, yeah, you can get however much notice you wanna give. But, yeah, I do believe before the council takes it up or, before the council finalizes it, yes, you need to make sure that the proposed map, the proposed ordinance, and the proposed, well, that's it, map and ordinance themselves, are probably posted on the website if possible. We have copies that lay in the clerk's office. The other thing you gotta keep in mind too is, the council typically does not adopt ordinances the night they're first presented. It's called a first reading, and they lay them on the table so that they're, and by that means they're available in the clerk's office, they're available for public comment for 2 weeks. So, we don't need at least 2 weeks. However, the meetings are never less than 2 weeks apart. Okay, I'll put it down, the regular meetings are not.
But they can adopt them.
Oh, they could. I don't look for them to, but they could. They haven't lately. They pretty well discussed for months.
And my comment was that I know many of you are fine gentlemen. You don't need the cynicism. Just let some time out. But, you know, when public notices go out on a Friday afternoon for a Tuesday night hearing, it creates cynicism. And I don't think that's cynicism that you gentlemen need or really desire.
Okay, so do we want to, so somebody wants to make a motion?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the map that we are presently furnishing utilities to. I don't know if that's the correct way to state this. I wonder if that map will have to be redone, take some of the areas out.
No,
Yes.
that's
that
right.
would-
That's it, right.
But this is basically the same. I would like to make the motion that this is the one that we vote on tonight, be presented to the council.
Mr. Summers, or out of where he lives.
Thank you. And any of those other parts that Chad mentioned that were undeveloped kind of there in the center. So if it doesn't have an actively hooked city utility to it, it would not be included.
The only piece I'm talking about is Mr. Summers. The rest of that line's
Rest of
going
that.
across the road there. We're actively, heavily in that area. I
Yeah.
don't see any problem there.
Is there a second to your motion?
I'll second that.
All right, so we're voting to basically recommend this map to the city with some fine tuning of
Yes.
Mr. Summers' property, and if Chad should find any other errors or anything.
Take that.
Make sure you put that, just don't make it word. I don't even know if I would mention his name,
Well,
but, you know, we know that is what.
I don't think we need to mention anybody's names. We need to
But it's
mention.
a different next thing.
Fine tuning part of, I could go along with that.
but the part we're talking about where he does get 2 tax bills, you see it clearly there on that map. So if that other part is not being serviced by electricity or utilities, he doesn't want it in there. I don't see a problem leaving it out. It's been there since he said 100 and some odd years. He definitely doesn't want to sell it,
And there's probably going to be a couple more that's
just like that.
maybe overlaid that can be
Yeah.
taken out. But, I mean, Chad can do that. It's served by utilities. If not,
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second that we utilize this map with minor adjustments that Chad will make based on any separation of properties, where the non-served, taking out non-served portion.
I think I can go along with that.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
All right. When you're making this motion, you're only addressing the boundaries and not the classifications, correct?
The boundaries, yeah.
The boundaries.
Classification should take care of itself, shouldn't it?
Well, I think that's gonna be the next thing that they ask you
Okay, I
about.
understand that.
It's probably the next thing they wanna go over. I think they've got some proposed stuff
Yeah.
on there, Mr. Bowles, but I think they'll wanna go over that next. That'll be one of the next issues they wanna take up, once you decide the boundaries.
But you got to have your boundaries first.
Exactly, but this is just to address the boundaries, this
Yes.
motion, okay.
I'll go ahead and say another thing on this. The reason why I'm for this, to me, it seems to be the most logical way of doing things, not necessarily trying to appease people.
The two farmers which we have in here, sitting over right on the east side of I-24, if they was to strike a deal and sell it to a larger, place, those people will be dealing with us and we'll be there.
They'll be
Right
wanting-
now, they're using it, they've been using it for 100 years for farming, and they're telling us they don't wanna do anything else with it, so we can still address that if somebody comes with a need, it may be 30 years, we won't be on here.
They're gonna
You won't
want-
be the mayor in 30 years.
They're
so-
gonna want utilities
Yeah.
if something like that happens.
Sure, they
Be
will.
so amazing.
Oh, don't rule that out till Bob Butler's sitting there.
I'm different than Bob, I feel like the farmers should be heard. And I know that's back in their family, and I don't see us doing anything with it. I mean, if we zone it tomorrow, all we're gonna have is headache and people not liking it, and we're not doing anything with it if we do. So, I mean, that's my opinion. But I would like to see the zoning go forward, because we've been sitting on this thing, sure, we've been here longer than me, I know, we've been at it for 5, 6 years.
I think we're ready to vote.
But the motion that stands is if it has an active city, if it has a city utility connected to that property or that parcel, then it would be included in the ETJ. If it does not, similar to Mr. Summers and how many of our other parcels that are out there that are maybe just ag vacant properties, they would not be included in the ETJ unless they took a city utility.
Right, that's the way I understand it.
I didn't understand, where that red line goes across, I know where he's talking about, I don't wanna see spots in that thing.
No,
That green area right there from 45 on, right, Chad, you see that piece there? I'm voting for the whole thing to go in there, I don't wanna sit there and
No,
have.
it's gotta be that red line.
But you're saying two different things. You're letting Mr. Summers exclude his out because it doesn't have an active utility, where there might be a lot of that area in there that's nothing but trees, and some of that's gonna be lower areas that doesn't have a utility on it.
Sorry, you're back in.
Well, you can't have it going this way, that way, and this way out there.
Gene?
Thank you. With respect to the question by the gentleman, hold up the other map, please, without the color. I believe the question is simple, I believe. That line represents the extent of utilities provided by the city. That's a true statement? That is the extent. All properties within inside that cordon line, if not in the city, will be part of the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Period.
Would you repeat that, please?
Those if that blue line is the extent of the services, utility services provided by the city, we all agree that it is, one or two exceptions on the exterior boundary notwithstanding, then the extraterritorial jurisdiction will be those properties inside of the blue line, but not in the city. There'll be no holes, there'll be no Swiss cheese, there'll be no pock marks. It will be that simple.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I agree, we've got places that are inside the red lines that are on there, that is the municipal boundary, the city limits, correct?
Correct.
And Chad and I on several occasions have talked about, the field that is surrounded by the city behind Metropolis Nursing and Rehab, totally surrounded by the city. There's some down there below Chad's office down there, you can see the little red circles. But if somebody is on the edge of that blue line and it's vacant property without a city utility on it, then I think it should be excluded, very much similar to Mr. Summers. I'm not suggesting you put a big hole right in the center of it and it's surrounded by them, that's different.
Well, I think what we're saying is we can make an exception for Mr. Summers, because he actually, the property that he's
Is-
concerned about is outside
correct.
the extent of our.
And it's on the edge.
I would submit it's not even an exception. It's not, if there is a parcel that's not served by utilities, and it's outside of the city utility boundary line, then by definition, it's not inside the city utility
Yeah,
boundary.
sure, that's right.
That's it.
Does any other utility serve this?
We have
The electric
we have distribution lines that run through here. City of Metropolis and Ameren is on them. And then
Doesn't some of the co-op service down in some of that area?
Not
Yeah,
down
I
here.
think when you go along Gurley Road, what I call Gurley Road, I think,
Homes along Gurley Road
the
are not-
co-op and the city, might be on one side of the road, but I think,
Right, the houses actually sit along Gurley Road itself after you make the turn
Uh-huh.
and head out to the industrial park. They're not serviced by the city. But the utility poles that run along this back area back in here,
yes.
yeah, they have Ameren line, there's Ameren power on those. But we took everything over out, Bullock and Fawn and that.
Mhm.
We bought all
Yeah.
that, you know, they
On
tied
further
in
back.
our lines. So that's why it didn't come up north of Gurley Road. I
Okay.
mean, those homes are already being serviced, they're not being serviced by us.
So are we in agreement on the motion?
Can I see the two maps next to each other? You need another half.
Okay.
Okay. The concern that Josh has is the yellow-green, there to the.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, there's a lot of crop fields right there.
But that's, now why is the line drawn there once again, because we have lines,
That is literally where our power poles are. There are power poles that run straight across through here that have our power on. So we're
I'm-
saying that
I'm
it's within the
assuming
extent of
If
our.
somebody's gonna build something right here and wants electricity, it'll be city.
Sure.
Correct.
And it can't be anybody else.
Yes,
So this is under the city's electrical jurisdiction.
yes,
even
So it
though-
would have to be city, it couldn't be Ameren?
that's right.
Correct, we took
Yeah,
those.
we took
Yeah,
all the-
Ameren's on the poles, but we took over the.
All Ameren's got now is the main feed line that goes to Brookport.
And you can't tap onto that?
Yeah, we wouldn't have it.
Not unless you bought it or something. I bought about all of them.
Okay, so I think we're ready to vote. So we're gonna have a roll call vote.
All righty. Clyde Wills.
I would prefer it to be something different, but I'll vote yes.
Mike Sowers.
Yes.
Don Harper.
Yes.
Don Gregory.
Yes.
Louis Bowles.
Yes.
Bob Lincoln.
yes.
Bruce Cummings.
Yes.
Mark Thompson.
Yes.
So motion carries.
Yep.
And, Chad will have further work on that map as far as the boundaries. So I guess we now want to move into, the interior classifications. I was shocked, I mean shocked, at the previous meetings, that nobody had said much to say about trailers or this or that, or the things that we have normally heard so much about. But I guess that's good after all these years. People use good.
I think it was good.
So what questions do you all have about the actual boundaries? And requirements within those boundaries?
Other than what's discussed in here,
Well, yeah, what's discussed in there is what we want to talk about. Now, this leaves us, I guess, this is that hospital? That's the hospital.
I think we made a little change with the recognition, make it one also.
Yeah.
Hospital C4, I think that covers, hospitals.
And we've got this land here that's still outside the city, even though it's surrounded.
Right here?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
You also have a couple
Metropolis
pieces
Street and,
on Barger.
That's correct.
And do we have something else down here that maybe?
Yeah, in Barger,
Yeah, there's, at the end of Barber Drive, north of Barber Drive, some's going up 12th Street, up here, up in Fairmount. Properties that are, well, this got closed in due to annexation, we took in Matt's property. They're all.
We've got residential, we've got, the airport, we've got Pizza Hut. Is that in that, that other side road?
Pizza Hut, is in,
Okay, so I didn't know if there was one zone that would kind of catch all of that and make it simple. So I know that there was such a thing as simple.
Apparently not.
We tried to make the main thoroughfare as it comes through town, what's called the C3 highway business. We tried to keep some of the more interior areas that were commercial, the C2 central business.
That's a motel out there.
I think all permitted by right within the highway business, so I mean, zone appropriate.
Why would that strip running in through Woodhaven in the south there, why would that be a highway business instead of,
It's all one parcel, one tract of land.
or,
It's just one tract of land, one long tract of land.
like it'd be neighborhood business or something like that, more neighborhood back
Okay.
than highway or something like that. Well, you know, it's not out on the highway, or,
Well, I mean, the frontage of it would butt up against
Frontage, yeah.
45, right. But that's what I mean, there's not two parcels of land there, it's just one whole parcel. So, I mean,
Zone it one and
if
zone
it
it
got,
the other.
yeah, I mean, if I have the ability to just subdivide my own parcels and say this part would be it, I don't know if I can do that or not, so.
Can we change it to, this back half to something else?
It's all one parcel.
I don't know what's the problem, I just, I mean, it seems odd, there's no highway
Who
back
owns
there.
it?
I'll say it's Mr. Armstrong, if I had to guess, yes.
Jeff May, some of that down too,
On the, back
that
in here.
little strip you were talking about.
Okay. And we can check to see if it's been sold or subdivided, we can check, to make sure that we got the most
I would
accurate
agree
assessor
with
data.
probably one piece.
Right.
I know Jeff bartered back and forth with Linda did prior to him
I get you.
carving.
And the purple here,
Industrial.
and down here.
Industrial?
Yes.
Yeah, and then a little over here.
Now, what about the classification for strip joints and such?
They have to go in an industrial.
Industrial.
Going forward, they'll have to be in an industrial, zone.
Leave it alone, they won't be in here anyway.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, if frankly, if this gets adopted, the one in its current location, which is actually non-existent anymore, it's
Yeah.
closed, will not reopen there because it can't. So, exactly.
I try my best.
And I think we still have things in place like 500 to 1,000 feet for residentially zoned parcels, residential use parcels, 1,000 feet from religious properties, religious parcels, churches, schools, stuff like that. So I know that.
Even within the industrial, there's still regulations that govern how many you can have within a certain area, how far apart they have to be, how many feet from, like just Chad says, churches and things like
So
that.
even though this isn't zoned over here, it's still, there's residential homes in this area, county, that would prohibit a strip club from going right there. You know, we have
And there's also church property.
church property there too.
But that now.
Like one of those are.
That's what I'm wondering, do we need to take a dry erase marker and start circling areas that need to be a certain color? Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to
Yeah.
get to. If there's some things that you guys want to think about changing, yeah, we probably.
What is your recommendation on the classifications? What have you studied and what is your recommendation?
Well, I mean, I think what I see on a day-to-day basis is, square foot lot requirements, people wanting to do
Yeah,
things.
no, I know, but that's all spelled out in here.
This is the work that he's done.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that,
As far as-
but it's all spelled out in here, the distances and all of this and that. No matter what classification you are, it's spelled out in here, isn't it?
Right, yes,
Yeah, I mean.
exactly right.
combination of what's there
Combination of that
and
and
what's on
this.
the map.
Right.
Now, trailers, of course, we limited somewhat as to blocks that they're currently in. We try to keep somebody from putting one up here on the nice lot on Gerard, 9th and Gerard or something. I know, just an example, there's a house down at 7th and Catherine, I think, that burned. It's a very small lot. I don't know what's gonna happen there.
Well, there's several of those all over town.
If I may.
Yes.
Another issue, obviously, not only am I with the Farm Bureau, but I own the United Country Real Estate Franchise Agency across the street. Chad and I have talked at length on several multiple occasions, about non-conforming use, where you've got a piece of property that's zoned one way, but, you know, for several decades, 30, 40 years, there's been a separate type of property on it, a lot of which you've got a piece of property that's zoned residential, and you've got a commercial building on it. Are those with the new proposed ordinance, is that gonna take care of those?
I think when I laid this out, I tried to take into reasonable consideration, you know, certain areas that were going to be rezoned by right as opposed by existing structure. So I tried to make the zoning decision, you know, as I laid it out, as I made changes, as this map progressed, based on what I felt would be permitted by right. So that way it was there because it's supposed to be there. Whereas saying that, you know, if this gets passed, we're gonna have those structures that are gonna be non-conforming and run into non-conforming issues. I mean, the glove factory over there in the middle of the residential part of town,
It's a problem.
it's tough. I mean, that's just, you know, it's tough to do, you know, I mean, there are certain things within the zoning ordinance currently, and possibly in the new one, that will allow that to continue to exist and operate to some extent as a manufacturing or storage facility. But, you know, it's just, I just can't zone that whole area any type of commercial, it's predominantly residential through there. But some of the properties along Fifth Street, some of them out here, you know, around Bob's Bowl, the KFC, the 8th Street. Some of those properties there used to be industrial. Now, like I said, this is more commercial. So we changed that to that central business, just about
The mayor's house.
the mayor's house.
Yeah.
Mayor's bed and breakfast.
But if this is adopted as it is, it's gonna change some of those and help alleviate some of the,
Yeah, I
The
think there's
issues
some
there.
properties along Fifth Street that, you know, there's some commercial
Obviously, the
structures.
one that we've talked about.
Yeah, there's a few that are gonna fall into just, you know, commercial. The interesting thing about, and once again, at one time, one of the options was to rezone kind of this thoroughfare, that highway business. There's residential structures up along both sides of Fifth Street. You know, the C3 highway business does not allow by right single-family residential structures in it. So, you know, there is a time frame. If something was to happen to one of those homes, that it could be replaced. But for the most part, if somebody was to tear it down or vacate, you know, empty a lot, and it was to set empty for the next, whatever the time frame is, year, 2 years, just couldn't put a house back on it. So, it's commercial property.
Well, some of them that had, say, a business of, all the small grocery stores around town, for instance, would they be grandfathered in if it's in a C3, or would some of the business at a hair salon?
Yeah, I mean.
You know, it's in a certain area, wouldn't they be grandfathered
Yeah,
in?
yeah, existing structures are always a permitted item. You know,
Yes.
we tried to just make sure that we
Yes,
molded the map to make them at least as best we could by right. If we run, I'm not gonna say there isn't gonna be something on here that is, you know, not, you know, a permitted item, a boutique or something like that. It's always possible.
What is the light green again?
Light green,
Yeah, what is that?
that's the ETJ.
Is it?
That's the ag district.
Yeah.
So, and that may or may not be what you wanna do in all of those.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask a question, clarification, Chad. You're talking about, down here along the
Fifth Street?
Moose Lodge and,
Mhm.
so forth, and,
Yes.
currently, is it written so that you cannot build a house in that? Or didn't we change that? I think we talked about it, say like there's a vacant lot now where, one of the Castleman houses was torn down.
Correct. One of those
Uh,
tore down.
Somebody may want to build a house there.
And I think they may have a time frame in order to replace what was there at one time.
But I think we want to allow that to be either residential or commercial, whichever everybody wants.
They got a price tag on around 35,000, you're not gonna pay that.
Yeah.
A house, so substandard, you know what I'm trying to do, in the package, lower.
Yeah, that price tag may come way down.
Mike had already voted. Disrespect, but you should.
Can't make him rent on it.
No, I know,
I thought we'd already decided a long time ago that we were going down each block and as they voted for it. I thought they voted that in, because Morris Mitchell was in that group, and then the greenhouse, and then the one that was tore down, and then, Elliott House and the State Farm. I thought that already had come in as commercial
Well,
zone.
some of it was changed.
Some of it was commercial
But-
prior to this,
I
but
think it was changed to a type that would allow either commercial or.
Oh, I thought it was highway business.
now we just had a general commercial, C2 general commercial, which would allow for single family, multifamily, or general commercial under our current zone. The highway business does not allow for it by right.
This is map I got, 2000, of course, it's probably been changed. This shows it definitely purple.
Commercial through there. And it was all the way up to probably,
Ferry Street, no, well.
now up to Ferry Street, because I think that where the Grenzer building was, whatever, Scott, I think Scott Street was where there was a break in there on the north side of the road.
Yeah, it was in later than that on that, you voted on mine in as, yours came as commercial. Yeah, highway business district, I think it came in as C3.
What it probably did, because.
C2.
C2,
Yeah. Well, can C2 be both housing and?
Now, you're talking about
Old
current
zoning.
zone, old zoning, currently, old zoning C2 can have residential
Okay.
due to our kind of
Okay.
pyramid style, yeah, you can put, R4 into C2. Right. So general residential,
Okay.
multifamily, single family, or commercial.
What I'm trying to avoid is us ending up with a bunch of vacant lots on Fifth Street because the houses burned down or needed to be torn down, and yet somebody's not willing to pay the price, or it's not really big enough for a commercial use.
So
It might be okay if they could buy an existing house, turn it into a lawyer's office or something.
So-
But as far as you want to build one with off-street parking and so forth, it's not big. Yeah, and
So Article 24, non-conforming uses under Section 3, non-conforming structures, any lawful structure which exists under the chapter of this ordinance, which this chapter derives, but which could not be erected under the terms of this chapter because of restrictions of lot size, height, setbacks, may lawfully remain subject to the following. Basically, you can't make it larger. Reconstruction, if less than 50% of the non-conforming structure is damaged, such non-conforming structure may be rebuilt as long as its non-conformity is not increased. If 50% or more of a non-conforming structure is damaged, such non-conforming structure may not be rebuilt. So if I'm reading that right, a house on Fifth Street that's zoned as highway business in the future, if it gets damaged beyond 50%, is not supposed to be able to be rebuilt in each place. So that might be something we want to.
And I don't know what Clyde's saying, but like over there across the street, all three of them could be bought for around $100,000 before that. And believe me, they want a commercial place, and I've been looking for a lot of years for commercial, just an offer. But I will tell you, until the economy changes, we're just not gonna see development. I mean, money's right, the cheapest, but I mean, it's just until the economy changes. But
So
you're
I
gonna
think-
see it, you will see it in your lifetime, you'll see commercial.
I think over the next 50 years, yes, that will all become, but I don't think we want to keep a vacant lot, force it to be a vacant lot,
Okay.
if businesses don't want it for the next 5, 10 years. Yeah.
But here's, well, if 36 value or two on the sides for commercial.
Yeah, that's gonna freeze that.
So I mean, that's, I'm looking at it as a commercial guy. And that street is your golden street in town. I mean, Fifth Street is just like 10th is up at Huck's. You know, I see that street taking off. It's just that it's gonna take one major
Development.
place or something to start, and then you'll see that part of the area.
And it's gonna have to, it'll take more than one lot.
Yeah. I know what you're saying, Clyde. I mean, I ain't got any problem with this. Because then you can always go back and do a special purpose or whatever if you had to. You get a Wendy's or something come in one of those three lots, and you had a house in the center and then some back of the house, I think we would accommodate them. If the two on the sides was commercial.
Well, if you allow a residence to be in that commercial district, then you would never have to rezone it. If they wanted a business, okay, if they wanted
Okay.
residence, okay. And certainly, we wouldn't want that in an uptown business district, you know, Fifth or, and is that what, 10th Street also?
Yes, the C Street borders both sides, by the way.
What's the new pink? I know that.
That is the central business, central business,
Central business.
which traditionally was always from probably about Fifth Street on down, above on the riverfront. Taking over this area here that used to be, I think, a lot of it was industrial, but now it's central business. Decided to make some changes over here because this used to be all industrial, where the old steel mill used to be. There's nothing industrial over there.
I'd like to ask our consultants about dual use of that highway district. You see problems, dual use, for either residential or commercial?
Well, I think that I have a couple of thoughts on that. With regard to the positioning of the commercial, the city is looking to take advantage from the existing traffic pattern, quality of the road, the accessibility afforded by locations on the frontage of those parcels. And I think it's reasonable to zone them for kinds of activities that generate revenue for the community. Consequently, I don't see the reason to continue by right the ability to build new homes in those types of areas, in those areas. There's a non-conforming home, then they're non-conforming. I think Chad read what the non-conformance rules and regulations are. It gets to stay. I mean, it's been there, it gets to stay. If it's damaged, if it's abandoned, then that non-conformity cannot continue. I think that's in keeping with reasonable practices as regards to zoning for commercial activity, particularly given those locations. On the ground, we have a number of different types of uses. They get to stay. I think that's fine.
And maybe you can elaborate, because I think this sort of answers where we're at. But if you look at page 63, that's the first page of the table. Table 1. Okay, items 5 through 9 are about dwellings, and where they can go, okay? Item 10 is existing residential dwellings. Now, looks to be permitted as of right in all districts except C3, C4. C3, by the way, is the highway district. So does that mean, what I think I hear you saying is that current residences in C3 would no longer be permitted as of right, but only as non-conforming uses?
Yes, that's
Okay,
my understanding.
that's what that, okay, all right. So in other words, it can't be expanded, but they can't, if they're damaged by more than 50%, they couldn't be rebuilt,
Or if they're abandoned.
or if they're abandoned or whatever. Okay.
It could happen.
Abandoned happens a lot right now. That's what's got, that's why I flinched, because when you said that, it made me think more about abandoned. Yeah, it's happening. We get places that, banks that won't foreclose, but the property's abandoned, basically.
I didn't know if he had
Okay.
shared.
He wants to know about it.
All right. sometimes it's easier to look at this table like this and just get to the short end, nuts and bolts of what you want. In these others where it's permitted as of right, essentially you can do what you want with an existing garage, is that correct, Dan?
As
I
long
mean,
as-
it can be rebuilt if it.
In terms of use, yes, but there may be, thinking this out for a moment, there may be conditions or restrictions that are new even for permitted uses when they get rebuilt that didn't exist at the time they were constructed. I mean, that's possible. But in terms of the use, if you meet all of the other standards, you're fine.
Yeah, if I met the setbacks or whatever else.
That's what I was talking, yeah.
Okay, all right. So basically, if it's got a dot, you can do it forever.
Yeah, and yeah, if there are comments to the contrary that dots don't belong somewhere, well, fine, but that's correct. Dots is and I believe it says at the top of each of the tables, permitted by right, permitted by special exception, permitted PUD, and not permitted.
Okay.
So I guess nobody else see this as a problem, the way I see it, ending up with vacant lots up and down Fifth Street.
As the gentleman said, if the idea is to provide for zoning for commercial activity, and we in fact have a series of very relative to today's standards, small lots, and we know that those lots are not in keeping with the standard that would permit contemporary commercial development. We in fact want to zone those areas for commercial. But I think it's clear that if we have 3 in a row, as we had in this example, and a home is built in the middle one, you're going to preclude commercial development on the abutting two. I think that's the reality of the marketplace. And I think that zoning is looking to assist the market bear some fruit on this, and would not then permit the reconstruction of a home in that middle lot. I think that's my professional opinion is that's a reasonable approach and a reasonable solution and a reasonable use of something. Yes, sir.
What other questions, comments do you all have?
I had a question, and this goes to the, I'm not sure, on the agricultural, that we, it's within what we voted on, the blue, red line, that you're looking at, and looking at the table, if there is a resident in that, within that, I have a question about one in particular, that where it says that in the agricultural area, a person who has a house that can have a swimming pool.
These were some of the things that I was gonna bring up tonight. We did have an impromptu meeting with the Farm Bureau, where they addressed some specific topics, some of those being accessory uses. We came to the tentative decision that it was just a blank. We just omitted by complete mistake on some of these. A swimming pool, hot tub, jacuzzi, yeah, not allowed. If you go to page, 67, I believe, the accessory uses. And at the bottom, number 18, says swimming pool, hot tub, jacuzzi, or similar facility, not in a commercial capacity, is allowed everywhere except in the A district. So you're saying, yeah, if you live in the A district, you can't have a swimming pool. So I think we just made an omission there.
So you left the dot out.
Left the dot out. Left the dot out. And
I'll tell that person.
okay.
So you'd have to make a motion to add that back in then, correct?
No. I think we were just, from that conversation, we had a list of things that we were going to make changes from
Okay.
that night of the farm bureau meeting.
So we can put a dot on that, dude.
We don't have anything to change right now because we don't have anything approved. So,
I think there was a couple of other ones, and there's manufactured homes, swimming pools, some things like that, that we felt probably
Well,
just,
on the same thing up there about the restaurants.
where you at?
66.
66, restaurant general,
Yeah, restaurant, fast food, restaurant general, retail sales and services. That's still not allowed.
basically, everything in the A district is farm or residential, basically. Now, or farm related, ag related. So if you wanted to put a dot next to, restaurant, fast food, restaurant general, allow restaurants in ETJ. Or
Well,
the A district.
got
I
a
think what we
question.
were trying to recommend is if someone wanted to develop an area in the ETJ as a restaurant, they would go through the rezoning process. They would petition
Well,
rezone.
the person who brought that up, I think ends up, it's not, what we adopted, it's not in that
Right.
anyway.
I mean, essentially speaking, there were some people at the hearings that, once again, I've, lived as a resident of, in Airport Road my whole life, and I don't want anything, well, and if your neighbor sells, they won't put a restaurant next to you. So you get a nice home life for perpetuity, guaranteed by right, because of some of these. Now, if they wanted to rezone it, that same person that wants to live in peace and single-family residence on Airport Road has a right to show up at that zoning petition, zoning hearing, for rezoning, and state their case, and keep it from there. So, where there was nothing.
This person was wanting to know if they would have a right to put a
Restaurant.
restaurant there.
Sure. Document allows for that, document allows for it to be amended or rezoned, and they could do that.
Well, speaking of this, we need to probably talk a little bit more about what's now the outside of the city limits served by electricity. Is there something that needs to be zoned commercial rather than agricultural?
Say there's commercial use out there, possibly some industrial use already. I would have to take a look specifically, but he started like a Jeff May property out there. I mean, there's residential and I guess commercial to some degree, whatever his business is. Some people may want it that way. Some, Malikos owns property here on 45 in out of town. He may want it somewhere, maybe, I don't know. But as far as existing items that are out there, I have to take a closer look. Most of it is just residential or open space or ag or farm. Jeff is probably the only property I can think of offhand.
Well, you've got, what, Jeff, and then Mr. Holt owns the drop lot just north of it. You've got,
Well, that's out. That's not serviced by city.
oh, it's not? Okay. What about like the Burnhams there on Mount
Yep.
Mission?
Yeah, Burnham's Auto Body, the
Both-
Tommy's, but yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah. That could be a commercial area. Or just exist as a non-conforming
Use.
business.
I think along the highway, I don't, just from, I think most of those places would, if we're gonna take them in, if you're gonna take them into ag, but you can't have commercial use like that type, whether it be Mr. Burnham or Dr. Brush or something like that, I think we'd be better off to put those into some sort of commercial zone. Just like your highway zone boundary, if you will, that you've got in town, because, otherwise you're hampering their ability to deal with those properties. And there's no likelihood they're gonna be farmed or used for,
No.
agribusiness.
But for instance, a C2 allows residential housing inside of a C2.
Yes, it
It's the
does.
C3 that doesn't. So if you zoned it Z2, you wouldn't inhibit either one.
Right, you're right, you're right. You're talking like the bid on curve about what Mr. Kennedy's property is.
Mr. Kennedy's that red square, right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think it would be, if there is, concern by the members of the commission that there are areas within the extraterritorial jurisdiction that should in fact not be zoned agriculture. That the place to start the discussion would probably be to identify what the uses are on the ground at this moment in time
Right.
and see what that looks like.
Okay, so it looks like we've got some more of a chat on that.
Sure.
I think that would help us the discussion and then see.
Other questions, comments?
Do we want to take out the specific things that Farm Bureau had identified relative to the ag district?
Sure. You guys want to talk about some of the Farm Bureau topics real quick?
Sure. We had a kind of a loose little meeting there. The city entertained us and brought Chad and Rick and the mayor came. We greatly appreciated that. We had a select few that we brought in and tried to keep it upbeat and creative, collective, moving forward.
Good meeting.
You know, we didn't want it to be negative overly. The first topic that we had, I believe Chad's passing those out, but it's on page 1 of your books, section 1, subsection 2. It states there, structures which are abandoned for 1 year. You know, it says protect and enhance the character and stability of sound existing agriculture, residential, commercial, and industrial areas, and eliminate non-conforming uses and structures which are abandoned for 1 year. So, what is the definition of abandoned? When it comes to an agriculture use, we can relate back to last year and the drought and the lack of rain that we had, that crops were short. So, many farmers didn't use all of their bin storage. So if we've got a silo sitting out there and we haven't used it in a year, basically it says structures which are abandoned for 1 year should be eliminated. So we're looking for what does abandoned mean in this particular purpose. And as far as an ag use, agriculture has a large cycle to it, that maybe ag should be eliminated. I understand abandoned houses in town, abandoned houses maybe in the ETJ, and how they deteriorate and affect values.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
definition of abandonment appears on page 4. Under section 15 definitions,
Okay.
to discontinue one's use, rights, or interest in property. Tax law. When the permitted or special use of a property has ceased and the property has been vacant for more than 12 months, abandonment of use will be presumed. I think under this reading, you can cease to use the property, but if the property isn't vacant, then it's not abandoned.
Perfect. Thank you.
Would be my reading, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Moore.
I certainly don't think anybody intended to include a grain bin.
Well, or, a farm building or that sort of thing. Okay. Number 2 on that list is gonna be on page 5. It's gonna be section 15, paragraph 6. An incidental farm occupation.
I'm trying to follow on it.
It's under agriculture operation definition.
Correct.
Yeah, I need to overlook that one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, for the question, because I may be in a position.
We've got agriculture operations specifically, it excludes It's a little over halfway down in the paragraph. And I understand stockyards, and whether some of you know or don't know, it was brought up by Clyde a little earlier, like a confinement hog operations or large chicken houses. Those are regulated by the EPA, and they've got their own guidelines. So really, you couldn't stick those in as limited as your ETJ is. The EPA is going to come in before you ever got wind of it and pretty well kick that one out. So, you know, not too concerned with the stockyards, agriculture processing plants, the high volume agriculture containment activities.
We think better language is likely because of the pretty, well, extremely general use of the word agriculture. We were looking at high volume livestock containment activities.
Okay, which would also fall under the EPA, and we wouldn't have an issue with that.
Right, we understood the comment pertaining to agriculture, and
So,
yeah,
because
we got it.
to us, high volume agriculture containment activities could be construed as a grain bin.
Yes.
A large grain bin.
And we heard it, right.
So you're gonna interject livestock into that,
Yes, sir.
and we wouldn't have an issue, okay. Moving down in there,
Did you get the incidental farm
No,
occupation?
I'm sorry, I haven't cleared up. Where, is he still in 6?
Yeah,
Where is it?
it's
Halfway down on the right.
Oh,
I know that, and it's part of the definition of agriculture operation. In other words, it's included. I mean, you got a list of things here.
it's
And
kind
then it
of
says
ambiguous.
Incidental
Incidental
farm.
farm is allowed, they were just concerned as what exactly is an
What would that
incidental
be?
farm occupation?
We talked about storage, of grain, fertilizer, nitrogen storage.
yeah, we talked about guys who,
Well,
you know, work on their,
are there neighbors?
on their implements.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're,
Josh comes over and I weld in my garage,
yeah,
your combine.
exactly. So, you know, we're just kind of looking for a little more of a definition there that allows for,
Or if I store grain for you, for example, because I've got bins that you don't, is that a incidental farm?
Yeah.
Well,
Ag operation.
I'll ask the farmer, is that an incident, I mean, give us a couple of examples that you would consider, so we have an idea as to what your concern is.
you know, to us, incidental farm occupations are exactly, Mayor Billy, Mr. Abel, is that, you know, a lot of farmers, you know, they're self-employed, and it's such a broad scope that a lot of, it could even be construed as some farmers do manufacture of some sort. You know, they make what they need, and they build it in their shop, and if you come in and you saw them while they were manufacturing this piece of equipment, you'd say, you're not allowed to do that, that's not farming, that's manufacturing.
So the concern.
But they're not doing it for commercial gain,
Okay.
they're doing it as incidental to a farming operation.
But it's incidental to their own farming operation.
Absolutely.
Because one could say that forming the plow or whatever
If
would
they
be
were doing-
incidental to the next guy, but the issue is the commercial nature of the activity.
Correct.
So you're, if I may, you're okay if we say you can't make the plow for your neighbor, but if you need to fix your own plow, that's incidental to your own farming
Correct.
operation.
You know, but still yet that it could be lenient enough that I do it for my neighbor. But I'm not doing it as a,
No, I think this is,
Occupation.
I think this is a black or white issue. You can do it for yourself, fine. If you go beyond what you do for yourself, that's commerce.
okay,
And it's not commerce unless there's money changing hands, is there?
No, I don't think that's true. In this case, I understand the definition of commerce, but if we say no money changes hand, what if it's a barter system? And what if he decides that that he has 3 brother-in-laws up and down 5 miles of road who all have farms, and he's gonna fix all of their plows?
I think the thing is, when you get to where they're just doing it one time here, that's not a problem, we're gonna look the other way.
But if we're doing it every day.
For a business, and you're sitting there, and we have a complaint by the person next door, then we've got a problem.
Yes, sir, because as you well know, whether it's, we'll pick on farmers for a minute, whether it's doing the plows or doing something else that's not permitted, it's fine until somebody notices. I mean, that's the way of the world. But I do think that the statement should address the concern of the farmer on his or her own farm. We're gonna permit, if that's what incidental farm occupations are, I mean, I think everybody would be happy to entertain a list that we could look at. But I think it should be permitted if it is for the farm on which the incidental operation is happening and not anybody else beyond.
I think what gets the difference is when you actually do it for hire, you got your sign out there and people
Yeah.
know they can go there to get a repair job done every day, then that's not, that, we're not gonna allow that.
And I think we're all on the same page, it's just how do we word it in here to reflect what we're talking about?
Okay,
We're,
then,
we agree. I think we're all there,
all right.
keep on trucking. The last part in that 15 subsection 6, paragraph 6, it says removal of trees without replanting.
If I may, agricultural operations shall not be defined as including the removal of trees for the purpose of development or redevelopment. Nor shall this term be defined to necessitate the replanting of trees that have been removed in the general operation of farms or farms. In other words, in the general operation of your farm, if you have to remove a tree, the zoning's not gonna necessitate that you replant it.
Clean your fence row.
We're cleaning fence rows, cleaning.
Because I think that falls under the general operation of farms or farm. I mean, if you gotta do this under the general operation of your farm to clean your fence row or put up your fence, the way it is now proposed to be written, you will not have to replant those trees.
Okay. And then a slight modification of that would be, and I realize this is all in the ETJ and we've really pulled that dude down, so it's gotten rather small, comparatively. What if you have trees? I mean, literally, you've got a woods of trees and you select cut, and you send
Call
somebody to.
Mr. Herring out to industrial park and hide the trees from you.
That's,
Well-
wait a second, that is in there. That's under agriculture, including forest and forest products, okay? Usable, agriculture, this is just definition of ag operation.
Correct.
It includes the use of land, which is devoted to forest and forest products, which would include harvesting of those products, okay? So, I mean, you're okay if you want to go cut trees on your own ground, because that's part of your normal routine, is select and cut.
Forest.
You raise trees and you cut
Okay.
trees.
Yeah.
That's ag.
Okay.
You're fine.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
Skipping to section 6, page 24. Site plan review. Under number 1, the balancing of owners' rights to use their land with the corresponding rights of abutting and neighboring landowners to live without undue disturbances. Examples of noise, smoke, fumes, dust, odor, glare, stormwater runoff, etc. I think I understand where we're going, but with ag in relation to that, we already have, harvesting of crops. You've got a combine that goes in there that's gonna make some noise, it's gonna make some dust. You get the right neighbor in there, they're gonna think that's infringing of their rights. We've also got some livestock operations, though I will say now, with the definition of the ETJ, they're probably very, very limited in that area.
I don't know how you're gonna determine how much dust the combine can put out.
The EPA can.
Thank you. Well, yeah, and you see
Somebody
what
can
we're saying.
complain, but,
I think
how you can say, well, that
This is
combine's
too
got
much and this one's not valid,
normal farm operation, would that cover it?
Normal farm operations, I believe, would be a great addition. I mean, that's usual and customary, it's been going on for many years.
Yeah.
And obviously, the newer the combines and the equipment, the better it gets, the less stress, the less noise. So if we could interject. Page 28, section 11, paragraph 4.
Hey Josh, go back to section 6. I want to have just a breakdown because I think we're missing the point. This is not an attempt to regulate noise, dust, fumes, or anything put out by a combine, okay? This is, first off, this only arises when you have a site plan. And a site plan is only when you have development, okay? And this says, how will the zoning department consider a site plan? In other words, if you're gonna develop something, building, structures, okay, how will they consider a site plan? Well, they'll consider the landowner's right to use his land by building that building and using that building versus, the right of the next door neighbor not to have smoke pouring out of the top of that building and over onto his property, okay, or dust pouring out of that building. This comes into effect more with development. Just the actual normal agriculture, you're not gonna have a
It's
site
considered
plan,
vacant ground.
you don't have a site plan for normal agriculture. And this just tells how the decision maker will balance what he's gonna require in the site plan. These are the factors he'll take into consideration, okay? So it won't, I don't see an impact in agriculture at all. Gene, am I missing something?
No, this is clearly under site plan review.
Yeah, this,
Okay.
you would be, it'd be a rare occasion if you had a site plan unless you were building some huge structure, but that wouldn't take into combining or other things, that would take into,
The noise, smoke, fumes, dust, odor, glare,
would be,
that'd
that'd
be
be no different than,
improvement.
and that'd be no from the improvement.
From the
yeah,
improvement.
From the improvement,
Okay.
and that'd be no different than if
Okay.
this was a manufacturing use or some other commercial.
Right, because the operation of the farm itself is not subject to site plan
No,
review.
yeah, you don't
Okay.
do site plan on.
Yeah, and I think that's the important issue, which is this.
Okay, perfect. Now we're rolling to page 28. Of course, this one falls under the Article 4, applications, permits, and fees. Section 11, building permit requirements. Permits are required for accessory buildings larger than 120 square feet. For accessory buildings less than or equal to 120, no permit is required, but all applicable codes regarding accessory buildings must be followed. We were, under an agriculture related, we were more inclined to read outbuildings smaller than, say, a typical pole barn, for the fact that a building permit would also require a site plan, would it not? And if we're in agriculture related,
All development requiring site plan. Site plan. Well, the mayor raises a good
Why
point.
would you care?
Yeah, if you're on our utilities, we want to review at this size. If you're not on our utilities, you're outside of the E-Take.
Bill, what you want?
Non-residential structures less than 2,500 square feet in area are excluded from the site plan review requirements.
which,
Section, page 24, section 7, site plan review required. All single-family dwellings less than 2,500 square feet in area and non-residential structures or additions less than 2,500 square feet in area are excluded from the site plan review requirements.
you know, 40 by 60 pole barn would be 2,400 square feet, so.
I think that, if I remember correctly, the question there was
It would be.
about, you can't do anything on an ag farm that's under 120 square feet. If you build a
Correct.
compound, it's probably 200 square feet.
Yeah.
We have to come get a permit each and every time we build anything,
Yeah.
do something.
Well,
And I think we were trying to enlarge that take into consideration, maybe that 120 square feet should be more like, in the aggregate, maybe 600 or something along those lines.
And then in scope, when we had our meeting, we were looking at the ETJ being a much larger area, and now that we've shrunk it down, some of this, as we read through it and try to rehash what happened in December, you know, we gotta.
Some days are
As
not
you-
even going to
As you say, the area's gotten a lot smaller.
So some of these issues have kind of
disappear.
went away, like the gentleman over here was talking about, you know.
Would that also fall that now you gotta get a building permit from the county?
Correct. You've always had to get a building permit, but there's also no fee and no site plan. Basically, it's a formality. You walk in, you say, I'm building this, they find the parcel it's on, you fill it out, you sign your name. More or less, all you're doing is telling the assessor, hey, come out and assess me in 12 months and see what I did. And he doesn't have to find it, he knows where to come and see you. Is more or less what that process is for.
On that item 4 right there on section 11, I
Yes, sir.
agree that it should be a building permit for less than 120, but on the second part of that sentence, it mentions that, the codes have to be, must be followed. How you gonna know the codes are followed if you don't have a building permit until after the building's built? Then if the code's not followed, then what? I mean, that's,
That's a good question. That happens, you know, even today in town, somebody wants to put, except like a portable storage shed on their property. It's not 100, you know, maybe it's just add 120 or 10 by 10. Still doesn't mean they can, you know, they can set it 5 feet away from their neighbor's house, or a foot away from their neighbor's house.
Or
on
put it right
on
into
their
the
neighbor's
sidewalk.
property. So, once again, when they call in and ask, do I need to get a building permit for this? You know, the answer is, usually I ask, what's the size of your building? 10 by 10. No building permit, but make sure it's 10 feet away from all principal structures, 3 feet on your property line, follow our setback guidelines. You know, it's just kind of one of those things. So in a situation like that, yeah, with no permit, it'd probably be hard to keep track of a lot of this until somebody called or said, hey, I think this guy put this too close, or something along these lines happened. Then you'd go out and say, you know, move this, so I didn't, you know, start the conversation that way.
Well, it has to do with tax base too. Sometimes the assessor wants to know if somebody's building something, you know, it's on a rural backset area.
Well, and that's why that building permit was done.
Right.
And ordinance was put in, just so that everything could be found. So that, that pretty well answers, and being that the ETJ again is made so much smaller, it's kicking most of that out. Page 29, section 12. You know, we made notice, about the building permits. It says C code of Metropolis title, land usage, and they're not readily available.
Oh, we provided Tammy with a copy of that like the very next day, where it
Okay.
states that 150-04 fees, 3 cents a square foot.
Okay.
She wanted that, I took that from the next day.
I guess most of us were, where do we go to get that? You know, is it?
What is the building code?
Yeah, is that-
City of Metropolis website, the front page, there's a code of ordinances link.
Click on it and follow that.
Yeah, table of contents, title, just right there.
and the building permit is 3 cents per square foot.
Currently it's 3 cents. I'm not sure if that fee's going up. If it's referencing the 150.04, it's still 3 cents a square foot.
Apply to, remodeling as well, I mean, or.
I